Well, welcome back to a new episode of the Threshold Lab, and we're continuing our conversations with sport coaches talking about the inner game of coaching, as well as how they create an environment for those that they lead. And today, I'm really excited to be joined by Cindy Bristow, former softball coach, pitching coach. She's done a lot of different things over the course of her career, which we're going to get into some of those over the course of our conversation. But more than anything, I've seen before we hit record, I shared that I've seen Cindy's stuff online now for a while. She does a lot in terms of service to the softball and coaching community, and I know this particular topic is one of a great passion for her. So I've had this marked on my calendar for a while, and really excited to finally have you on for the conversation, Cindy.
I'm thrilled to be here because I love learning, and it's funny because Zach, I don't, as a vessel, I just love to pull it all in and learn what I can, and then I'm always wondering, do I know enough? And so this is an opportunity for me to learn from you too. So let's go.
Oh, it's wonderful. I think your humility is one of the things that drew me to you in just previous conversations, and things that I pulled from you through past interviews and so on. So I think as others that have been on the show or have been tuning into the show know that I kind of like to jump right in. And I think one of the things that makes your story a little unique too is the fact that you've coached now at nearly every level of the game within softball, from being part of building USA's first Olympic roster, to running your own coaching platform, being a college coach. And I think one thing that when you talk to coaches, one of the most important things to start is just being really clear on who they are as a coach and their own coaching identity. So through all of these different experiences that you had, I want to kind of start there. How did you get kind of clarity on your own coaching identity early on, and how has it evolved over time?
I don't know that I had clarity other than I wanted to coach. Like I knew that at a really young age. I was playing college softball and I raised my hand to be the high school basketball coach. I knew nothing about coaching basketball, but I just knew I could do it. So I go to this clinic in Long Beach, and these college coaches are talking about posting up your 6'5" person, and I'm like, what the hell does post up mean? And 6'5", my tallest kid's like 5'9". So at that moment, I didn't learn anything about basketball, but it helped me be a really good speaker because I remembered thinking, if I'm ever speaking, I'm going to speak to me out there that doesn't even know. So I jumped into learning everything I could to teach these kids. So that's a kind of a roundabout way of saying clarity wasn't, I didn't need to get clarity before I coached. I coached, and as I went along, I got clarity in where I wasn't good. I knew I didn't know offenses, so I just taught the hell out of defense and conditioning, right? And then eventually we would get beat by somebody who knew offense. But, I don't know. I was young and arrogant early on, thinking I knew, and I didn't know jack. So I had more passion than knowledge, and as you get older, maybe your knowledge catches up with your passion. I don't know.
I think, so with that, I think that's a perfect kind of segue in a sense of you talking about how that experience is kind of what helped create clarity over the course of time. And like one of the things that we talk a little bit about is like people like to say, oh, you learn from experience. Well, you really learn too from reflecting on experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being willing to think through your what you've done, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. And so as you kind of go back to those early kind of stages for you and kind of forming, like what was important to you as you were just starting out, like when you think about how you wanted to define yourself as a leader, as a coach, how would you describe that?
I wanted to help. Like I think more than anything in this whole journey I've been on, I just want to help. that's my underlining why. My best way to help is in softball. That's where I know the most, and specifically pitching. As I carved that path, I I started. I've always felt that the athlete was key, but when I was younger, I was also too key in that, right? Like, as I've gotten older, I realize I'm not key at all. I'm just a means to their key. And it took me. I think I've always had the curiosity to try and reflect, like you said, and how could I do that better, and what am I missing, and what do they need, and so if they need it, I need to go find it out instead of holding it against them. And I've always kind of had that, but with that younger arrogance that stops you from asking the right questions and going down the right paths, right? You tend to cast blame on the athlete instead of going, whoa, there is blame, but it's more on me. I don't know enough to help them. And so it just was, I kept doing that, but my mother taught me young, you can do anything you put your mind to. So I was willing to raise my hand for positions I was nowhere near qualified for. But I figured I'd figure it out as I went. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I don't know. I don't even know if I answered your question.
I know. I think it's safe to say that you did not only answer the question, but that you've figured it out. And obviously, you wouldn't have had the success on the field that you've had, but also off the field too. Again, with just the countless people that you've impacted within the game. And so, one of the things though that I lost my train of thought. There was going to be one piece of this that I was gonna that I wanted to hit on with what you shared. Oh, I didn't want to just jump to my next question. This is why we can edit it too.
Yeah.
Is for moments
It,
like this.
right, because when you're young, you think you know, man. You just think you know, and I can remember being so damn stubborn, thinking I knew, and the head coach is doing it wrong, and I got the answers. And man, my first head coach at ASU, when I was first assistant, pulled me in and said, look, I'm the head coach, you work for me, and this is a Friday, and I'm going to take the weekend and decide by Monday if you still work for me, because you need to be loyal to me. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I'll do anything you ask, I swear. And, I needed that because I was out there like, oh, she's wrong, she needs to do this, because, I've been doing this for 3 seconds, and I know what I'm doing. And, like, I had some hard moments where I was coached or managed hard, because I could see this has nothing to do maybe with anything, but I've had some of those moments along the way from some bosses, because while it might look impressive on paper, I can recognize it was probably a lot to manage as my boss, right? Because I'm out there just thrashing through the
Yeah,
wilderness.
it makes a ton of sense, and that actually I think speaks to maybe the question I wanted to pose to you. You might have answered it in a way, is you mentioned a couple times now, maybe some of that arrogance that you had early on as a coach, and I was curious, like, at what point did that start to shift for you, and really what helped kind of drive that shift?
It is a it wasn't gradual. There's a very clear, specific point when my arrogance shifted. I was coaching in the professional league, living in Columbus, Georgia, and our league is in the summer. So if you've ever been in the South in the summer, I didn't grow up in humidity. That's all I'm going to say. And we're in last place. So I march into that, like General MacArthur. I march into that locker room and give him the welcome to last place speech. Like, they were just not aware they were in last place. I needed to make them aware, and everything would change. So I march out of there, and I come to work the next day, and I'm crossing the Chattahoochee River. I'm in the middle of the bridge, and it dawns on me. These are all Americans. I have a couple gold medalists on this team, national champions. They're trying, and this is the best they can do, and it's last place. I need to get there as fast as I can because they're this close to giving up. And everything I've done to this point has only accelerated their willingness to give up. I'm the ass in this picture, not them. And I remembered that so clearly from that day. My whole goal has been when athletes are struggling, their first inclination is to shut down and quit. And my whole existence needs to be to add some clarity and some direction through that wilderness and help them just do one more and find a way out of that like horrible wilderness. And it changed everything about my relationship with coaching, my relationship with them, how we did. That was almost like what our all-star break would be. We were halfway through the season. The second half of the season, we were first place. And it was not, I didn't change a name on the roster. I just changed that it was about, I was about them instead of they were about me.
That's such a powerful shift, and obviously it's under a type of circumstance that you didn't exactly probably envision when you took that job and when you envisioned how that summer was going to go per se. But it sounds like it led to a very transformative kind of shift for you in how you thought about coaching. Like you said, the change was not in the personnel. The change wasn't even in the tactics. It was more in a change in attitude, a change in perspective that you had about how you viewed coaching and leadership and service. And um, one of the things that I kind of with that is what what started to be different for you as a coach kind of following that experience? Like you mentioned kind of how that changed kind of your perspective, but like what were some of the things that you started to do maybe differently so that way you were actually propelling your players forward as opposed to maybe contributing to what was holding them back?
So I started immediately putting them into struggling, failing situations. And then we were going to manage those better. Instead of avoiding those, we were going to be masters at managing them. And because you can't, especially there's 3 games on this planet that I don't know why anybody in their right mind play: baseball, softball, and golf. Because you have so much time in between failure to just reflect on your failure. And most of us are not great reflectors. We're pretty great failures, but we're not great reflectors. The best in those sports are great reflectors. They still fail, they just reflect better. So I'm like, okay, we're going to fail and we're going to learn to reflect and then to approach the next one better, like flush it and reflect and flush, reflect and flush. And I remember I had an amazing shortstop who taught me that, because she had just come off a national championship in college, and she was super competitive, but it's our competitors that are the worst at this. And so as a shortstop, she's so influential, and she would shut down. She'd get so incredibly mad at herself when she failed. She'd just shut down. And so if I could get her to manage through that, that would like kind of permeate out to everyone. So in that journey, she was teaching me, but I was teaching her. It's like suddenly what I needed to really know became clear through the suffering. Only because I was willing to seek the answer, like to consider it could possibly be me on that bridge and not them. Right? And plus it was a great answer because there's one of me and there's a hell of a lot of them. So that seemed like, okay, let's go. If I just have to fix me, okay.
Again, such a like a powerful kind of distinction for you to reach, like your own kind of reflection to, you mentioned the importance of that for your players, but also as a coach, and being willing to, I think part of coaching is being willing to look in the mirror, right? That figurative mirror that's in front of you, and ask yourself, how am I contributing to this? And sometimes that comes with, you have such good intentions as a coach, and sometimes that can have unintended or negative consequences. We may not even realize it until we're willing to kind of look in the mirror and kind of see the truth, if you will, or get the feedback from those around us. Is what I'm doing or how I'm coming across align with how I think it does?
Right.
And kind of with that, when you think about talking about kind of struggle, right? Like I've heard you talk about that before, that the importance of player development is learning how do you master struggle. Could you talk, you mentioned too this kind of idea of flush, like reset, reflect. What does that look like though from a practical standpoint? Like how do you keep athletes engaged in the process? Because struggle can also feel so overwhelming for many, especially as you mentioned, like with those competitors. So how do you keep them engaged kind of in that process to keep going forward?
I think that's where I've evolved to have. Initially, I can't even remember what I would say back then. I came up with some kind of like wording that I thought was like short, but now I look back and it was too long. And I've since, that's like where I'm not a mechanics master, but I think this is my laser focus. As soon as an athlete, and in my case, a pitcher, throws a pitch, it floats, it's flat, they miss it, whatever. It gets jacked. That's the moment where this next thing I've come up with really matters. We can get furious or we can get curious. Most athletes get furious. They get furious at the ump for missing the call, or, that was a bad pitch call. Why'd you call that? Well, your head could shake, but it didn't. But you could get so furious takes you down a dark path. You only you waste the time to correct, and you're only now more pissed off the next pitch. So chances of success just start plummeting. If you get curious, you ask better questions. Like, was everything I did in that right, and he or she just ripped it? Did I lose it at the release? Did I load right? Like where in that process with curiosity could I impact that on the next time I throw it? So furious instead of curious, which I just came up with yesterday in full disclosure, because I used to say get curious instead of critical, because I thought the two C's were good, but the rhyme I think is better. The furious part is all their self-talk, like, God, I suck, not again. If I throw another ball, he's going to pull me out. If I walk him, like if my shortstop can't feel, all these things we have that are just blames, instead of the curiosity doesn't attach any blame anywhere. It just is like, okay, I mix these two components, the lab blew up, thank God I didn't. Now, where do we go from here? Like curiosity has such an unemotional approach to something, which gives you the potential to immediately solve it. Because now that we're in a pitch clock, it's important that you're a master at solving it. Because I don't care what's in your ear or what fingers are being flashed or what's on your wrist. You have so much time, you got to fix it because you're throwing it. And we have less time for reflection than let's say a left fielder who booted a ball, and it might get a ball in 4 more innings. But we have more opportunities as pitchers to botch our recovery time in between pitches. And I think that is the secret sauce to any great performer.
Mm, mm. We could probably spend the rest of this episode just diving in more to this, how you've seen this play out, how you've coached through this. I love that distinction of furious versus curious. And I love it for a few reasons, if I can kind of speak to that. I think one is like when you look at pressure and you dissect pressure that like goes into the sports that we play in any competitive arena, judgment is one of those things that turns up that perceived dial of pressure, right? And so when you talk about the furious, like that's what I heard a lot in what you described. That's where athletes have a difficult time letting go, is because they're kind of stuck on the judgment of already what's happened. And there's this like old parable or quote about like let go or be dragged. In essence, like all of a sudden they're getting dragged by whatever has just played, and then now that affects whatever's coming next, the next play. The other thing that's powerful with the curious piece is there's a woman, her name is Tasha Eurich. She wrote a book called Insight, and it's all about awareness. And she talks a lot about like most of us, we think we're very self-aware. She kind of decodes what does it actually take to become self-aware? And one of the things that she raises that you actually kind of touch on in essence is those that are self-aware are very intentional about the questions that they ask themselves. They don't ask a lot of like why questions, like why did that happen? Why did I do that? Again, that fosters judgment. But they are intentional about, okay, like how can I do this better? Like what happened, right? It's more objective. Like what was the mistake? Okay, what do I need to do next, if you will? And I think to bring it kind of full circle, what you've now created in essence is somebody who's better able to tap into that inner coach that they have with them, because you're not going to be standing out there next to
Yeah.
them during a game. That's the other hard part. You have all this time, well, in baseball or in softball, and yet we're not going to be with next to you. And so versus that inner critic, and that important distinction of like which one are you feeding? And in that moment, in that short amount of time between pitches, can you get curious? Can you be reflective and reset so that way you can adjust and be adaptable? Like that to me is at the heart of I think what I hear you describing.
And what you said is so true. With pitchers in the bullpen, I start all this mantra happens constantly. I'm the least important person in this bullpen. I am the least important. If you start to depend on me, you're going down a trail that is going to weaken you and strengthen me. I'm sitting on a bucket or in the corner, or maybe I don't even make the trip. I'm not out there throwing that pitch. I cannot be the most important. My role is to empower you, not you to empower me through your reliance on me. And so I'm more like a genie who you kind of that's even too powerful of a word, but like a Buddha who you rub the belly once in a while to feel good and empowered that you can do it, right? And so the more we can kind of recede into the background, and hey, when you ask me a question, what I do on that, throw it right back and say, tell me what did you think you did? What did it feel like you did? What did you see that you did? You're teaching them to do just that, Zach. Ask those self-reflective questions that allow them to depend on their own judgment and less on yours.
Mm, mm.
Because they've got to do it.
With this too, one of the things that you're kind of highlighting is when players get better. Part of player development being getting better at mastering struggle and how helpful that is in now preparing you for the game. What we also see, and I don't know if this is the experience in softball, but I know at times in baseball, a challenge for players in preparation is the game is already challenging. There's already a lot of failure built into it. It can be challenging in its own way to then create failure, to create struggle in how you prepare, in how you train, because again, the games we're going to go compete later that night. And so whether you see a parallel there in softball or just in general, this ties so much to a player's trust and belief in themselves. So how do you keep players' belief systems kind of intact when maybe those like results or those struggle when the results aren't there and struggles kind of persist?
Yeah, that's the dicey thing. I think we have too unrealistic of a view of success. Like we think we should succeed 90% of the time. Anything less than that is unacceptable. It was mind-boggling for me recently. Drivelines released a lot of info that the average MLB pitcher misses their spot 9 inches. Like the strike zone's only 17 inches. So basically, these dudes they aren't even close to their spot. So if that's how they are, well, then it might be okay for us too. And maybe the unrealistic demand for perfection is coming down from us, which they just mirror. I think our players have just become mirrors of whatever the people around them, the adults, the coaches, the parents, expect. So I've tried to even reflect in that. I've told that there's this thing I say, and it seems ridiculous. If it's in you once, it's in you always. And where I've come up with that is, if you threw a killer pitch once, it's still in there. It's always in there. And what isn't anymore in there is your belief that it's in there. Now you start wondering, God, I hope I can do that again. I wonder if I can do all these like fragile comments, wonder, hope. God, what if it's not, like doubt comments, right? Instead of that kid that shows up that, well, hell yeah, that's in me. I can't believe these other 400 pitches missed. Like that's that's unbelievable, right? And you say it and they look at you like, God, that's dumb. And I go, I know it sounds dumb, but it's true because it's in you always. And then I would go and say, here's the thing, your skill is in you. Wherever you want it, it just shows up. It's right there. Once you have skill, it lives in you. It goes everywhere you go, but what doesn't is your belief in that skill. So bike riding to me is that perfect example. Like once you know how to ride a bike, and that process is a lot of struggle and pain, but you keep doing it. You have a support system. You don't go get bike riding lessons. You just have to kind of struggle through it, right? Once you get it, it's in you. You get on a bike 20 years later, you don't wonder if you're going to fall over. You don't hope you don't wipe out. You just get on. You know you've dragged the skill with you. Boom, go. But this pitching thing, which I just threw a great pitch yesterday, my belief is gone. I'm back to hope today. And I think that is the key to skill. Like the great performers have really somehow lasered in through their training this I know I have the skill instead of I hope. Like Tom Brady, no one thought he had the skill, but Tom did. Where you look at some of the draft picks, the front office knew they had the skill. The dude hoped he did. It didn't work out.
Mm. I've heard this attributed to Joe Madden in the baseball sphere, and I don't know if it did come or not from him, but I've heard him describe there's like these 5 levels of becoming a big leaguer. The first one is how do I get there? Second level is how do I stay here? Third level, I know I belong here. The fourth level is I want to make as much money as I can. And then the fifth level is I want to win as much as I can. And I think one of the things that I hear you describing is that transition from level 2 to 3. How do I stay here to like how I know I belong here? And I think that's where somebody asked me recently, like, what's the difference, between AAA guys and big league guys, or different. And I think that unwavering belief that you're describing, that I know, that's so convicted, is so essential here. And I don't know if this is how you would frame it or if you would have an alternative perspective, but I think one thing that I've gotten to a point in talking to coaches about is like sometimes I think we view confidence or belief as this like on-off switch. It's like players got it or they don't. And the reality is there's levels to it. But I think what's become really important is to understand that like confidence is sometimes more rooted in focus than it is like what you do. So in other words, like what you're describing by reminding them that like, hey, if you've done this once, it's in you. It's always going to be there. Like what happens though is like we quit focusing on like the reasons why we should be confident or trust ourselves in the first place. And we start getting so fixated on where we're lacking, what's not working, we're not where we need to be. And we get sometimes so consumed by that it slowly erodes our confidence. But sometimes confidence is about reminding ourselves of the reasons why we should be confident or trust ourselves in the first place. And I think that's what you're describing as a coach. You play such an integral role in like kind of framing that and shining a mirror on that for your players.
Yeah, right. Confidence is a word like we hear it a lot. Players hear it a lot. I don't know if they actually know what it means because I feel like they're in it. They feel like they're in it so seldomly. But it's belief, it's knowing, it's courage, it's a lot of things, and this thing where I'm supplying the answers, even that, I would have our players say, like, what do you guys think it is? No wrong answers. Let's just like throw some words out. What does it mean to you? And it's you said something earlier, like succeeding at high levels under big pressure in big arenas. Anytime all of that stuff is taken in, you're not going to win. You're not going to do well. But what you're doing in those arenas is the same thing you were doing on that Tuesday afternoon in the humidity in the middle of nowhere. You're doing your skill. Just the outside has gotten bigger, right? More people are watching, maybe the lights are brighter, the TV cameras are there, but that's irrelevant because you're still just doing your skill. And when your brain can, instead of being this hot air balloon that just floats around, if it can stay inside of you and remind yourself that every skill starts in your head, then your head starts supplying the information that your body parts need to do this skill that brought you to this arena.
Mm.
Easy for us to kind of talk about, very hard to do because I've been in situations where my mind stayed in me in a big event. It was calm, it was peaceful. I knew we would succeed because I knew my plan. The trust was so high, but the calm was so palpable. And I've blown it in arenas like that because I had none of that. The anxiety was high. My concern was for what would people think? What if I blow it? If I don't win, I'm asking all those why and if questions. And the last thing I was focusing on was right here, right now. And
Mm.
so,
I I think it's in one of the Heads Up baseball books, I believe, by Ken Revisa
oh yeah,
and
because
Tom
you were a
Hansen.
Fullerton guy.
I am, yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
a little biased. I'm
yeah.
biased for
You should be
sure.
a lot biased. Ken was remarkable. I went to Cal Poly,
Unbelievable.
so yeah, when Ken was in his heyday. So amazing man. Anyway,
We could probably go on a long tangent here and share and swap stories of Ken, I'm sure. One of the things though, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it's from their book, but there was a quote that they shared that was, I think, attributed to Mariano Rivera. And and the sentiment that he expressed is part of his success came down to um, being able to focus on the moment and not the magnitude of the moment. And I think that was such a really important like distinction, like focusing being in the moment versus the magnitude of the moment. I think that's a lot of what you're describing. And sometimes, even inadvertently, we as staff or as coaches, sometimes it's easy to accidentally like kind of build the magnitude around for players, let alone they're already doing that for themselves because of their own goals, their own values, their own dreams and things, and also the things that they're getting. They have teammates depending on them. They have parents maybe in their ear and so on. There's all sorts of things there. But the thing that I actually wanted to pull on from this is you kind of mentioned it's easy to say, it's hard to do. And one of the things that I've found, I think the players that it can be the most challenging I've seen for staff at times are those that like know all the right things, but they don't do the right things. Because again, knowing and doing are two separate things. Knowing
yeah,
is easy, doing is hard.
yeah.
With that in mind, how have you worked on kind of narrowing that gap with your players, and what's been kind of your experience with those? Because we have players that like they could write a great mental game, a baseball book, but it's like when we watch you, it's like I don't see you doing that. And so, just kind of within your experience, how you kind of fill that gap.
I think when that happens, and I've been that, like you throw it out like this. It to me, that's a warning sign of complete doubt. Like they're putting this knowing out, like, oh, I'm gonna spew back all the crap you're telling me. That's just they've shielded themselves in this flashy armor to protect them from this gooey, delicate inside that really doubts it. And while they may have the physical skills, their belief skills, they can feel are more brittle. So they're going to throw out that, I don't know. It's like, dude, you're trying too hard. Like, you're clearly not doing it. So I think we have to have a trust relationship where it's usually not good or bad. Like the worst thing you can say is, how you doing today? Because then the answer can be good and on we go. And it's not good. Like, so the next question should be, well, tell me what's good. Like, put a number on it, 1 to 10. And they'll usually come up with 4. And it's like, well, that's not good. So that I think we need to dive deeper and say, in this process, let's pretend from the very beginning to the end of that play, can you tell me where your belief was strongest? And it's usually at the beginning, and then as we get closer to the end, it starts to now, what was a 9 or an 8 starts to be like a 4, and by the end of it, it's a 2. So what is happening throughout that skill that is eroding your belief? So their starting full of belief, I guess, and then ending without it, usually. So that to me is a routine addressed issue. So the really solid mental thinkers have a solid routine that keeps bringing them back to their best self in here. And I think that player needs a solid routine. Their routine is like, just this, I'm going to act like I'm all that when really I'm not. And then hope I overpower the situation. And they're usually the more talented players because they can usually crank up the skill until they meet somebody with like a $500 bat in our sport, maybe $40 in your sport. And you're not going to win. The math is my ball's $10. His bat's 500. You got to throw through this strike zone the size of a toaster, and he swings once. I've got to do it 3 times. The math is never in my favor. What's in my favor is I know, and he's guessing, so I can beat his guess, but only here. And I think when we start to add specifics to a player like that, and now let's practice through that. Let's not practice out in a library environment and then to train to play on a freeway, right? We've got to throw all these things at them and see how solid that belief can stay. And where does it get fragile? And fragile doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means, can we strengthen that? What would happen if we strengthened it? No judgment in the improving. Because I think those kind of players, Zach, also pile a ton of judgment in that weakness. And so they really overcompensate to hide it. I don't know if that was an answer, but
Two things that stood out with what you just shared. I think one, kind of going back to being intentional with the questions that you ask, right? And I think part of that is in a similar vein. One of the things that I've tried to work really hard to shift away, because it's so ingrained in kind of the culture, and just not just in sports, but I think in life, is like, people will ask like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, or like, how'd you feel after a game, for example? And it's like, it's such a, I remember being in the weight room with a player a while back who had just had probably one of his worst statistical games in his entire professional career. And in that moment, it was like, more often than not, as I've listened to other people and stuff in those moments ask that player, the first question is often like, hey, how'd you feel? In that moment, it's like, that is the last question I'm about to ask, And so even just the differentiation between, how'd you feel versus like, what did you feel? And the latter being something like, now you're actually getting them to be more specific, more localized, more like driven, and like that now you can kind of build off of, like you mentioned, with some of the follow-up questions that can come, or like using the scaling questions. Like I love the scaling questions as really rich tools, not just for what the player initially responds with, but then what you can do with that response in your follow-up. The second thing, though, that you touched on is, again, kind of this notion of creating an environment that prepares players for like as best as possible for the actual demands of the game. And as we've kind of seen, at least in baseball, I think over the course of time, coaches have gotten a lot more intentional about making practice and training more representative of the game. And, skill acquisition is certainly kind of gotten more kind of mainstream in more intentional ways. I think too. I'm sure you've heard this analogy, like the difference between a tiger in the zoo versus a tiger in the jungle, right? Like that notion of like so often historically we were preparing our players to just go like the zoo is what practice and training looked like, but the game was the jungle. And so now how do we get better at that? So I kind of want to go off of that a little bit. For you, what are some of your favorite ways that you've tried to make training and practice and create an environment that's more kind of jungle-like for your players?
Well, let's go pitching catching because that's where I spend most of my focus. It starts with catchers are trained to turn balls into strikes, which right there creates a false sense of skill for me. Because now I'm throwing a lot of balls, but I don't really get the feeling I am because my catcher's saving me on every pitch I throw in the bullpen. Pitchers hate throwing to the 9 ball because the 9 ball is you hit what you hit and you miss what you miss. So it takes a while to train the catchers that it's okay for you to call that a ball. Because if I say, all right, Zach, was that a ball or a strike? They'll be like, now I can like please my coach or please my pitcher, and they're stuck in this hell, right? So we activate the catchers that it's going to help us to call what it is, because the umpire isn't going to be our friend. The umpire doesn't care. They aren't going to try and help us. So you're helping us. That takes we're 3 weeks in by the time that helps. And then the accountability of the 9 ball. And then you've got to differentiate between, are you working on a specific technique improvement, or are you working on the competitive environment improvement? And I think you have to have both, because if you try to have it all in one, it just gets washed out. So you might try a couple with the competitive environment. I'm throwing a curveball. I need to make sure I hit my release, make sure my hand's in the place it needs to be. I can look at that through all the video and all that, right? The metrics. Now I'm going to put that in the competitive environment, and now I'm going to score it, because that is what the competitive environment is. We have 2 scores, balls or strikes. And so you are now held accountable to that. It's not bad. It's just a reflection of where we are, and that it gives us a path to where we want to be. So I don't think we do that enough. Certainly in softball, we don't. And we also throw too many pitches, which I think is the big difference between softball and baseball. I was looking at Shohei's return to play protocol, and his first live outing, he's throwing 22 pitches. Jesus, we throw that at 10 feet warming up, right? Like, we just throw pitches like they're like confetti. And then you get in a game, and it's like every piece of confetti like is so meaningful, and they're like, what? So you have to be intentional. That's where we impact it. We have to be intentional in what we're asking the athlete to do, and how does it immediately insert itself out there. Like, I don't care that you're the best bullpen pitcher. You're going to care that you're the best game pitcher. When you toe it up on the rubber out there, do you believe you're the best game pitcher right now for this game? And if the answer is yes, I've helped you. If the answer is no, we need to better make that seem like that, make it more seamless. And so start to investigate as a coach, like, what are the elements? Where is the belief element slipping away in the routine? Is the belief element slipping away maybe in the timing? The timing in the bullpen can be forever. The timing in a game feels rushed. Well, now I need to fix the bullpen timing, right? So much of those things we can impact being more thoughtful and intentional.
I've heard people say that a skill is only a skill, or a skill is technique that withstands pressure. Like in essence, like you need like whatever your technique is that you refine and you develop. Like if it doesn't uphold under pressure, then it's not actually a skill. And so to your point, like it's not an either or, it's both. But being intentional about how you train both is so crucial for all of us in like the environments that we're creating for those that we serve. The other piece of it, um, what was I going to add with that? Is I was going to add one last thing. See, this is where my brain goes. But um, gosh, it's terrible.
No,
Talk
it's
about
hard.
judgment.
No, it's hard. See, you went to judgment, and I'm going to. It's hard to stay deeply focused for a long period of time. Like you're really
Mhm.
focused on listening, and now you got to flip it and try and focus on question asking, and that's a hard. That's a hard thing.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate your empathy for sure. So if it'll come, I'm sure it'll come to me. But what I'd like to do is maybe as we kind of shift to the back end here of the conversation, I kind of want to turn it back to you because I've enjoyed this first chunk, talking a lot about how you've created an environment for your players to get better at mastering struggle and the importance of creating an environment that hones not only their physical skills but their mindset and their mental game too. But before doing so, we've talked a lot about this at an individual level. And I would be curious to ask you, because I think it's a lot easier to obviously pull from successful seasons, successful case studies. Like we love to study the winning teams and everything like that. And yet, there can also be a lot that gets overlooked that you can learn a great deal from when you go through losing seasons and tough stretches. So, as a leader and as a coach, for you, when you've had stretches with teams where maybe it's been filled with a lot of struggle, maybe it's been seasons where there's been a lot of unmet expectations. What's worked best for you in leading a team in those moments when maybe the scoreboard isn't in your favor?
Yeah, those are when I think you really do your best or your worst coaching. And it this does start with you. It starts with your ability to show them how to handle this situation. Are you going to hang your head? Are you going to start blaming? Are you going to make excuses? Or are you going to acknowledge your role in this? Are you going to show them? It's like we're lost now in a tunnel. And are you going to turn your flashlight on and try and find your way out? Or are you just going to pick on someone and say, it's your fault, we're lost in this tunnel. Now we're screwed. And so I think that you don't stop coaching just because you're losing. Like who needs a great coach more than people that are losing? Like that's really that's when we need you, not when you can like bail. So dig in. If you're all about what you say you're about, coach, now I'm talking to me, like Cindy, if you're all about what you say, which the outside doesn't matter, you're not doing it for all the people, well, guess what? Now's when you need to show up because all the people have jumped off the boat or they're all pointing a finger at how horrible you are. So start coaching, like dive in. Who is still performing? Who needs to be pumped up so they don't quit? Well, how can you reassess, not reassess, how can you divert their thought process from the outcome, which is the loss, to the path, which is where in this process am I doing well because I need to keep doing that? And where do I need to make an adjustment? What is my path out of this? If each of us can take a responsibility to their little part in getting us where we are and a little road out of it, we'll be out of it. But it starts with you. We had a hugely horrible season last year. There was a lot of drama around the team. And a lot of it was There was just some coaching swirlings, let's say. So I could bitch about it, I could whine about it, or I could just show them how to ignore it and carry on. And that's what I chose to do. At times I was better at it than others. But I had quite a few players say that my behavior showed them a lot about how to behave. And I thought, wow, they're looking constantly, right? They're looking at us for belief. If they throw that bases loaded pitch that gets jacked for a grand slam and they look over at us and our heads sunk and, we're all pissed off, that doesn't help them. But if our head's up and we're like, yeah, man, come on, let's go, this next pitch. Like, we're always leading, and I think that's when they need leaders. It's hard. God, the whole thing's hard. That's why most people pay to get in. This whole thing is hard. But you can do hard. Just do hard better. You're doing hard really shitty right now. Like, you're just noticing how hard it is. Well, so what?
Yeah. Anybody can notice how hard it is, or
Yeah,
call out the problems, what's not
yeah,
working.
yeah. Right now, my mom's a huge Dodger fan. Oh my God! Even she's like, she goes, hey, guess what? Good news, the Dodgers didn't lose tonight because it was an off night. I'm like, just stop talking. You'll be on the bandwagon by next week. So,
It's so important. What you're describing in essence is like with players, like they watch, they're attuned to what they see from us as staff. I know over the years and just talking to different players, like I've had players come up at different moments, and say things like, hey, like why is the staff feel kind of stressed out right now? Like what's going on? And like you look
oh
at the
wow.
players in the locker room, and they're fine. Like they're preparing for the game just like they normally would, and obviously I think there's layers to that. There's different things that go into that, but I think it's a reminder for us as staff and as coaches, like what you mentioned, the consistency for us. If we want our players to be consistent, then we need to model the consistency. If we don't want our players to be reactive to the roller coaster that this game brings at times, then we can't be overly reactive to the roller coaster. And I think it's obviously much like everything that we get into in these conversations like this, like very easy to say, not always easy to do, but it is so crucial. And I think that's a nice opportunity for maybe you, where I would be interested in kind of knowing what were some of the things that's helped you over the years maintain that consistency in kind of your mindset and your approach, so you're also not kind of riding the peaks and valleys with your team.
I think all of us have to have a place where we recharge. And I'm a very much a people person. I love to connect with people. I give, give, give. But that has a cost. And pretty soon, my battery's extinguished. And if I show up with an already extinguished battery, I'm no good to anybody. So I have to know the ways that I can recharge them. And mine is I isolate, I read, I reflect, I like to learn. So I can shut it off pretty quick and I can dive into it pretty quick. And so then that's helpful for me to always show up as close to my best self for that day as I can be. But I don't know that I always was that great. I think when you're younger, you have a lot of energy, so you spend your time spending energy. As you get older, you're like, Jesus, I have 10 minutes of energy today. Where am I going to spend it? So, so I don't know. You just get to be more aware. But again, aware and do are two different things. And a lot of times, like the season's long. Like a college season's long. I can't imagine a pro season. So we have to show up today in the bullpen because that's what it says on the schedule. But take a pulse. Like these people are exhausted. So let's talk about sequoia trees and how they influence and what the significance of that is. Or let's just talk about, hey, I deal with college student athletes. How are classes? Tell me some cool things you're learning because here's something cool I learned today. Like, okay, we can move the needle forward and not have had to throw because our arms are already trashed. And that can kind of connect us pump in some juice that now we can get through tomorrow.
With that, I think one of the things that you mentioned, and I've noticed this is a theme for some of the other coaches that I've had these conversations with that have been doing it for a while and have some longevity in their careers, is the evolution of this, and recognizing that our energy, our focus, we have a limited bandwidth emotionally and mentally for those that we give, and yet we're, as you mentioned, like as coaches, we're constantly giving, constantly. You're also the person that people are coming to always for answers, and sometimes you have those answers, and sometimes you don't. But either way, it can deplete us as staff. But the interesting thing that has come up more recently in some of these conversations is like, how do you protect that time? How do you protect time for you and for your energy to be restored, if you will? And so, whether that's through your own experience or coaches that you now see and you talk to and you mentor, what are some of the suggestions or thoughts that you would offer to those to try, like, okay, how do I now protect my energy and my well-being so that way I can now go give the best version of me to those I lead?
That's a great question. I think we aren't that important, so if we can first just acknowledge that. Like, if in walking to the bullpen, I decide, oh, wow, I'm going to look at the bell tower today, or, oh, those clouds look like dinosaurs, or, you know, is that someone skateboarding with purple hair? Like, if I just let my thoughts wander, the whole program isn't going to collapse. And I think that if you let yourself acknowledge that you're not that important, that you can take a break and let your mind just acknowledge things around you instead of trying to be an iron man or iron woman with focus. That's a place to start. And I think you need a circle, a very small circle of dependable, trustworthy friends who will help hold you accountable when you need it, support you when you need it, but have a different way of doing it. And I have one longtime friend, and we're that to each other. And how she goes about it isn't exactly how I go about it, and yet we're very similar. And because you're not going to come up with all these answers yourself. I've gotten into meditating lately, and I always thought that was legs crossed and humming and candles and crap, and it's none of that. But it's helped me go to sleep at night, and the more I sleep, the better I am in the morning, right? And so I think if we aren't that important and we start seeking answers for ourselves, answers are going to come. But if you think you're that important, then you feel you have to put out every fire, and pretty soon you're on fire. And we aren't that important.
This has come up in conversations with people, kind of recently, and just like one of the things we were talking a little bit about is like the lessons learned when you're embedded within a team, right? And you're there every single day. Like, the reality is at this level, at the highest levels, like there's always a fire. Like every day there's a fire. There's something new. Mm-hmm. Now, some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are just smoke. And some of them, sometimes as staff, we pour gasoline on. We're
Yeah.
making the
Yeah.
fire to be a bigger thing than it is too. But the recognition of what helps you make sure that you're in the best position to lead. So that way you're not dosing a flame with more gasoline and turning something into be a bigger issue for not just yourself, but for those that you lead. I also heard this a while back of this gal kind of talk about, like, for those that, have kids and you get on a plane, right? Like they tell you, they're very like intentional to tell you, make sure you put your oxygen mask on first. And she's like, obviously most parents and now even leaders have heard that sentiment and how that applies to all of us. But the point that she raised as like a part two to it is inevitably you know this and yet you still won't do it. You're still going to continue to grind. You're still going to continue to push and give. And so her recommendation was inevitably when you don't put your oxygen mask on, maybe first, make sure you know who in your life will put your oxygen mask on for you.
Ah, yeah, that's good.
And I thought that was a very powerful added piece to it. And it sounds like for you, you know, you in essence, you've had that, and that person looks different for each person and what those needs are per se. But just the importance of having, I think that's become a dominant theme in a lot of these conversations is the benefits of coaches and leaders having mentors, having other
You're
coaches,
frozen.
having a support system to help you navigate the highs, the lows, the pressure, and everything in between that leadership and coaching entail. And so I think that kind of, you know, brings me, you know, I want to be kind of mindful of your time, but I want to kind of ask a few final kind of questions here because, you know, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned just your desire to grow, your curiosity, your hunger to kind of learn a little bit. So could you walk us through a little bit like what your process for learning has been and just kind of how you go about integrating new ideas and new perspectives into your coaching practice?
Yeah, so curiously enough, I sucked as a student. Like, I was horrible unless I loved it, right? If I loved the topic or the teacher, I was all in. But man, I was the first one to go, this is stupid, which is usually code for I'm not very good at it, right? Nothing I'm great at is stupid because, like, I'm great at it. But so as a student, you would think someone as curious as me to learn would be good, but no, couldn't be bothered. So now I realize the role information plays as I'm coaching, and I want to go learn it. So I'm always in search of a new way to say something, a new way to look at something. And as I absorb it, I've got to filter it too, because I can't just dump it all on the athlete's head. And so I will, I'm very open to say, hey, I just learned this new thing. I read this thing last night. I don't know if it'll work. Do you guys want to try it out? And they'll go, yeah, let's try. Or, you know, one of them will and two of them won't. And I'm like, that's cool. Let's just try. Let's see. Let's work our way through it. And I think that that kind of openness and willingness and it helps them. It loosens them. I'm not perfect. They don't have to be perfect. But I'm always throwing, I think that's also like when you try something new and learn something new, Zach, it can be scary to actually utter it because now only if you're worrying about what someone else's opinion is. Again, there's that outside view. But if you don't care so much and you just say it and throw it out there, people like they gravitate to it and they respond to it. Like this, we both write newsletters, and you know it's got to be scary when you write something and you're like, I wonder what they're going to think, and then you're like, I don't care. I'm writing it mainly for me, and if someone thinks great, then that's awesome, and if they don't, then that's too bad. It kind of hurts, but that's too bad. And so my process is I've stumbled. I love your newsletter. There's a few that I really like. They always seem to have an alternative take on stuff, and you're like, oh wow, I saw the same thing, but not in the same way, or I never even saw that. And I just love to have for myself my own perspective change because I do feel so responsible to help athletes that are right in front of me with the most I can know at the time. But then the path that takes you down, Zach, and you've probably felt it yourself, is, God, I screwed up all these players way back then because I was teaching them all that. And you're like, no, you're forgiven. It was what I knew at the time, and the time has passed. But if what you knew at the time is still what you know now, well, then shame on you. Quit opening your mouth because you're not going to help anybody. It's our obligation to keep learning, to keep helping. Because their obligation is to try to improve, but my obligation is to know as much as I can at the moment to assist in that path.
Yeah, yeah, and being willing to upgrade and level up
Yeah.
that thinking and that knowledge along the way. I love what you share there, and that's so true too for all of us. Like we're at given time, we're all doing the best we can with the level of thinking that we have at that given time, and yet if you're not willing to be a learner, to grow, to like explore things. I think one thing that I've appreciated, and the more I've gotten to talk to you and hear kind of your perspective on things and read things from you, is like your willingness to learn from kind of anything and everything, and not just getting, sometimes we get also very narrow within our discipline, very narrow within our channel. And so to kind of broaden that out, next thing you know, you start making connections to things. And I very much feel that even just with writing, like you mentioned with the newsletter, like more often than not, it's really a practice for me to like dump thoughts out of my head onto paper and be like, okay, does this make as much sense as it sounds in my head? Because it always makes a ton of sense in my head. It
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
sounds like it could be it's a TED talk,
Yeah.
right in my head. But then it comes out and I'm like, that doesn't actually flow the
Yeah.
way I thought it would. And I think that the other point though that you raised is like I'm continually surprised by what sometimes does land for somebody. Because sometimes it's the messages that you think may not actually land with some,
Yeah.
like the majority, or like, oh, you share something that you're like, oh, this is it's cool, it's interesting, and I like it, and yet it's not my favorite thing I've shared. And sometimes those are the things that you get feedback on, like, hey, I love this. This was a great, I'm going to use this. Whereas the other times there's things you share where like, oh, this is gold. This is really good. And then you share it and it's like crickets.
Yeah,
So
no
it
one
can be
says
very
anything.
humbling.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly. That was it. That was my last issue. I spent all this time on the preparation and the fall, and nobody said a damn thing about that. And then I'm talking, just throw in this last thing about the trees and the roots and stuff. Oh man, everybody talked about that. I'm like, okay, all right, okay.
It's such a good metaphor. Yeah. For those that do not follow or subscribe to Cindy's newsletter, I highly suggest it. I've been following it for a bit now. And that particular analogy around redwood trees and the roots and things is such a wonderful metaphor that's so applicable to anybody leading a team and a group. And so I'm excited to continue to learn from you in that space. And then I think the other thing too, I shared this in one of my short form kind of podcast episodes in this past week. I've heard it phrased as like the law of the frequency, which is basically this notion where like you could have the same song playing on two different radio stations, exact same time. You can only tune in to one of those songs at a given time. You can't tune into both. And so the message being is all of us are tuned to different frequencies with the messages that we hear and the people that we listen to. So for example, some people they're going to be very tuned to your style, your tone, the stories that you share and like also your relationship to them. And then there's people out there that like, like there's all the influencers, there's public speakers, there's coaches out there that like have great sound bites, they have great messages, but like it doesn't connect. It's maybe not the person you would normally go to, and hence why it's so important to share those ideas is because you never know when your frequency might be a great match for somebody, and also like your willingness to adapt your frequency, come up with new stories, change your tone, build the relationship, and so on. So um, and I think that kind of brings me now to the last kind of two questions I wanted to ask you, because I know a lot of your focus too has evolved to supporting coaches and developing leaders. That's not necessarily new. It's something that you've done for a long time now, and all the different ways that you've given back to the coaching community, hosting different events, philanthropy, and many other things along the way. When you think about the next kind of generation or this current generation of leaders in softball or just coaching in general, What do you feel like are the skills or qualities that need to really be honed to kind of set them apart to lead effectively?
I think there's two. We in softball, collegiate softball particularly, are in a boom era of salaries and visibility and stuff, riches. And that's enticing to coaches. They want to get in because they want to be seen on TV and they want the big salary and they want the stuff, the gear. And under that is, do you work or don't you work? Because you can get in for the gear and get thrown out because you don't work. So you coaching is a working profession. It's hard. It's long hours. It if you put the work in, that's what a lot of the that's what any good coach needs is the work. Period. With the focus being on the player, not on you. So that'll never change. The outside again, we're talking outside will change. But I think the other thing is they have to build a really good filter. Like there's so much now. Are you a tech person? Are you a talk person? Are you a mechanics person? Like what is your real skill? Know it, like hone it, and try to dabble in the others, but don't try and be an expert in everything. There weren't that many choices when I was growing up through coaching. There's so many choices now. It's like your attention. You only have so much. Are you wasting it on social media or are you like using it somewhere else? And so I think that they have to find what they're good at, get better at what they're good at, and where they're not good, find mentors that can at least coach them up a little. Ask for help. I have some young coaches that reach out to me that are just marvelous. They're so hungry and they're so wanting to learn. And I have some veteran coaches yesterday that reached out and said, hey, I have this kid coming in. I'm stumped. What do you see? And so answers come from questions, but you've got to be willing to ask them. And young coaches, if they can ask those questions and put the work in, then they're just young. They aren't they can succeed through their career in a tremendous time in our sport.
It, I love that throughout this conversation, that sense of humility, it continues to kind of shine through both in the form of putting in the work for you and how you've described that evolution over the course of your journey, but also even now as you tie it into having that filter as a coach, which I think is also a nice callback to the self-awareness that we talked about, because I think a lot of that, like in order to have a really good filter, it also you have to have some good awareness around who you are as a coach and your identity and your strengths and things like that. Because once you're clear on that and you have clarity around that, now it becomes kind of easier to filter out what doesn't align, what doesn't fit. That doesn't mean that you're not open to different ideas and different perspectives and things, but to your point, it's also about being clear on who you're not, and not trying to do it all, which I think for many, especially as we start out, it's such an easy pathway to kind of go down. So I like how we've kind of come full circle in throughout this conversation. And my final question here is one I posed to all of the guests that have been on it, and I want to just ask, what's something that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about, Cindy?
That's a fantastic question. I haven't never thought about that. I I think my journey, if you put it on paper, it looks amazing. Like my mom goes, "Oh, honey, that's so fantastic," and then my brother goes, "It sounds like you can't keep a job." So I'm most proud that I can just do whatever's been put in front of me. Like I'm not someone for goals, because so many of the opportunities I had were first time things. So how would I have had a goal to do something that didn't exist? But I think I just kind of feel like I can, I don't know. I'm not an egotistical person, but underneath, I'm a strong belief in my skills. Drop me somewhere and I'll figure it out. Like, I think that's different than ego. So I think that I have that, whether it's dealing with people, whether it's, I don't know, figuring out recently how to like equalize a ceiling fan to keep it from making you crazy. I don't know. I feel like I can figure stuff out, and that takes me on some pretty cool places. So
Mm.
I don't know if that's a thing though. Now that you talk about it, like I don't I don't know if I answered that, but I am really
Yeah,
proud of that because I don't talk about myself. Like I don't. It's not about me, right? Like that ego thing.
yeah, yeah. It's others that have asked this, you can tell it locks some coaches up because that sense of pride is not something that generally gets viewed per se. But I think what you kind of hit on with that kind of ability to just figure things out is like that resourcefulness.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
I think that's something that could probably easily be added to what you mentioned as kind of those cardinal skills or qualities of coaches now is like how resourceful can you be? Because in a lot of cases now, it's like, especially at certain environments, like a lot of people, they're doing a lot of the same things or they have a lot of the same amount of time per se as others, but it's like how do you become adaptable? Well, part of that is learning how to be resourceful and learning how to maximize time, learning how to find information and make information connect not just for you, but for those that you lead. And it's like that's just such a central thread to everything that you've described in this conversation is how resourceful you've been. And I don't think you have the career that you've had as a coach, as a leader, and as a person without that resourcefulness. So I'm very grateful that you got a chance to share some of that in our conversation together.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been fun. I follow you too. I feel like we're in this little admiration society here. I read your newsletter, and I think yeah, it's been a pleasure. Like I've really appreciated it. Your questions have pulled out a lot in me, so I the reflection has helped. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for dabbling with me, and I'm excited to continue conversations. And for those that again want to continue to learn and again increase their resourcefulness and openness to different ideas, I highly encourage following Cindy not only on social but your newsletter. Is there anything else that before we wrap up today that you'd want to put out there? I know most people like I bring on like self promotion is not ever their thing. So if there's anything that you would like to highlight that's exciting for you right now, I'll give you some time to do so.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
okay.
it's
That's
not my
okay.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah, Pitching Coach
yeah.
Central. I made a website not for me, but just to share stuff. So that's kind of what it is. Pitching Coach Central.
Cool. So, well, thank you again, Cindy.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
beyond
you,
grateful
Zach.
for your time and
Yeah,
your reflections. So,
yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for all you do.